everyone, welcome back. It's Michael here from Bulgaria or in Bulgaria, and we're going to talk today about the subject of getting great deals because of international. So obviously we're here talking about international business, international living, etc. And there's a very interesting expression that I want to share with you. You've probably heard this expression, you get what you pay for. And I really want to contradict that. You don't get what you pay for, you get where you pay for. Okay, this one thing will save you a ton of money. And I remember back in the day when I was not familiar with how to do this. And I kind of like loosely knew, hey, companies are outsourcing jobs to India or something like that. But the value you get more often than not is based on where you buy things. Okay, it doesn't mean that you can't find deals in other places. Of course you can, and in any market there are deals. There are ups and there are downs, right? When you buy it is also important, right? But by and large, what I have found traveling the world to many different countries, experimenting, seeing things, etc., is that you don't get what you pay for, you get where you pay for. Okay, so let's use some simple examples. Let's start with, say, clothing. Okay, so say you want to go and buy clothing. So my wife, she loves to buy, all these fancy clothes of different types. Well, I can tell you that we've bought clothes in many, many different countries, and the best deals tend to be Italy, particularly. There's a famous outlet outside of Florence called the Mall. There's another one a little bit farther north, closer to Milan. That's great. And Andorra. These two places tend to have the best deals. Okay, if you can find the stuff in Andorra, you're going to do very well, but the selection is not so good, and there tends to be better selection in Italy. So what we've noticed is that if it's European brands, we pay less in Europe, even though there's VAT, than we would pay in, say, America, in Canada, in Asia, etc., by and large, right? On the flip side, if it's, say, American brands, then we can generally get a better deal in America. Okay, so that's something to be aware of right off the bat. And if you're somebody who travels a lot, this means you can save a ton of money. So for example, we went with some clients, we did a nice little trip together in Italy in January. So this is the best sales in that time of our part of the world are in January and in June. Okay, so this is and so this client, they like to go there every year. And so we said, oh great, we're gonna do a trip together. And so you could buy, Prada shoes for 100 euros and Armani jeans for 50 euros. Okay, so that gives you some idea, like they'll have 50% off of 50% off sales. That's like how extreme that this can be. Okay, so this is a where when it comes to clothing, right? Again, similar thing, if you're in Andorra, perfumes, clothing, things like this, great deals. By contrast, we found generally Dubai is very expensive. I don't know why, because you would think that taxes would factor into it, right? Which, by the way, if you're in Europe and if you're able to, if you're foreign or whatever, you can claim tax-free on top of that. And so often you'll get another, let's say 11 to 14% back, right? So that gives you an added advantage. Now, in theory, you can do something similar in San Marino, but San Marino is a little bit more complicated. They just don't have the selection, basically, is the problem, right? So if you're gonna shop for those things, those places are great. There's a new place as well. I believe it's near Nice in France. But anyway, these are some of the options, right? Then you'll have cases where prices go down a lot because of currency fluctuations. So we were in Turkey in September of 2018 and got some amazing deals, right? First of all, hotels, very cheap. So Turkey was already an inexpensive market, then their currency goes way down, now you get insanely good deals. It's fantastic, right? It's the perfect time to go on vacation there. And so you can go, we went to Cappadocia, beautiful, definitely go check it out. Aside from price or anything like that, Cappadocia is an amazing, magical place, so highly recommend that. So that's something. Then we can talk about labor, right? So that's another pretty simple one. So let's consider some examples. So I was in Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur. We were there for about a month, and we need to get laundry done. Okay, so what are you going to do? Well, you could go to a laundromat, or you could use overpriced hotel laundry services. And I've just found in traveling around a lot that often there's a laundry service that you can use locally, which is both inexpensive and very convenient. So I happened to Google I found a place that had a WhatsApp number. You could WhatsApp them, super cool, right? I said, hey, I was wondering if we could get, and we have like 2 big suitcases worth of clothes, right? It's a lot of clothes. So, okay, great. When can you come and do this today? And they're like, well, it's a little bit late to do it if you apply over the website, but if you send me your information here, we can come and get it within an hour. Perfect, great. So they come and they pick up our clothes, they take them away, they wash them, they dry them, they fold them, they press them, whatever, they bring them back the next day. It cost less than $4, okay? That's ridiculous. That's an amazing price. And that's, partially due to, the cost of certain services and partially due to the cost of labor. We get this in Thailand, right? Places like Thailand where you can get custom-made clothing, right? So you can pay the same price for a custom-tailored, fitted-to-you shirt or suit or jacket or something like that as you would for just a normal one somewhere else. So perfect, Normally I'd probably get my clothing tailored anyway, so why not? Seems like a good idea. So you get something like that. Then I have another business where what we do is we buy vehicles in some places and we sell them other places, right? And we take advantage of disparities in 2 things. One is pricing in the market, right? So we buy in places where it's less expensive, but also where they have models that aren't available in other parts of the world. So again, you can do this for things like vehicles. Then you can also do it for things like housing, obviously. Like what does it cost to have a beachfront place? Well, you can have a pretty great place in, south of Spain for a tiny fraction of what it would cost in California, right? Quite similar in a bunch of regards. Some people might prefer California. They might, on the other hand, some people might hate California, so it goes either way. But, you go to places like Marbella, it's beautiful, right? There's lots going on, it's wonderful, etc. And, it's really not very expensive. So that's an advantage that you can get. You're saying, hey, look, I want to retire somewhere, I want to buy a retirement place, or I want to buy just a vacation place. Great, consider doing that. Look at where it is that you're buying. What are some other examples of how we can do this? Well, again, like I said, obviously, different types of labor, right? So in my view, generally the best, and I want to talk here about not just price, but about value, okay? Because it's very popular to outsource to, for example, the Philippines, right? A lot of clients, people we work with, they have some sort of an online business, they have their support staff will be in, say, Philippines, right? Some of them get staff in, say, Venezuela and Brazil and, other parts of the world. But what we have found pretty consistently for designers, for developers, for customer service people, etc., is the best value is in certain parts of Eastern Europe, particularly places like Serbia, like Ukraine, etc. So not EU, right? If you consider, say, the prices in Serbia compared to Bulgaria, you're going to find that it's, I would say 20 to 30% cheaper. Not always, but, somewhere in that range between Serbia and Bulgaria. So that's an advantage, right? You can benefit from that. So, and in those cases, you're talking about quality as well. So just generally speaking, there are cultural generalities, right? Now, these cultural generalities, of course, do not hold 100%, right? There's lots of exceptions to the rule. But if I'm hiring a lot of people, then there's a cost to, so there's a great book called Wealth, Poverty, and Politics by Thomas Sowell. And he talks about just some of the cultural differences, right? Like in general, when they averaged it, when they were measuring the production on rubber farms in Malaysia between the Chinese Malays and the Indian Malays, the Chinese Malays would on average produce 50% more. Now, if you're the Indian Malay who produces just as much or maybe more than them, then, great. And if, it's the Chinese Malay who underproduces, great. But if I'm somebody who's hiring 100 people or going to have to do a series of hires, then my probabilities are going to be higher. And I can just say that generally speaking, my experience when talking to both our own experiences as well as clients is that when we hire people in Asia, particularly kind of like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Philippines, we notice certain things. So for example, the design sensibilities are not the same as Western design sensibilities. So you'll look at it and they might think that it looks great, but for somebody from, say, Europe, from North America, etc., it's like, that just looks weird. Like, how do they think that that looks good? Right? And you can see it in, differences in clothing, right? There's these bright colors and things like this, which are not so popular. So if I want to get an aesthetic that's maybe more appealing, I can go to Eastern Europe, I can hire people in Poland, I can hire people in Romania and Ukraine and Serbia and countries like this, where I can get very good design and I can get it at reasonable prices. Similar thing with coders. I would say that my general experience has been that culturally there's a few things that happen in Asia, particularly certain Asian countries, that are not the same as they are in Western countries. And this makes a difference in management. So for example, if you're in Philippines, often there's a culture of saving face, right? And so to people who are not from there, they don't understand this. And it can, so basically people are being dishonest to you in order to save face, often for you, right? It's like, oh, hey, I didn't want to. Or maybe for themselves, it could go either way, right? And so as a result, this makes it challenging. Well, if you're not used to that style, and if that style isn't something that you can work with easily, well, it might make a lot more sense for you to hire in Europe. Another thing is the concept of accountability and deadlines and things like this, right? Generally speaking, I would find that hiring people in countries like that, this is more of a challenge, right? Adherence to deadlines. People are going to be more likely to tell you, yeah, I can do it, and then try and figure it out later than really dive into the deal. And if you've hired people on places like Upwork, etc., you've probably experienced this, right? You've probably experienced where there's a bunch of people who will overpromise and underdeliver to you. Not to say that that's all of them. There's some great ones. I've had some people who work for me. And generally, when I find somebody who's good from a place, I want to keep them as long as possible, right? I want to say, okay, great. You're fantastic. We like working together. Let's give you lots of business. Let's try and keep things going. But in general, we find it's much, much easier to hire the types of people who we're looking for in these markets. And that may have something to do with the fact that it's a more similar culture, right? Because culture certainly makes a difference in terms of understanding people, etc. On the flip side, the approach that you may need to take in order to get the most out of people, right, may be quite different. I have some clients who have a business. They have a fairly large office, large operation in one of the Eastern European countries, and they'll talk about how, the style that works for motivating those people is quite different than you might get in, say, Netherlands, right? And, so as a result, you need to be able to play with that. But the important thing to realize here is that you tend to get different value in different areas. Generally speaking, I would say that, certain markets, for example, again, I'm an enormous fan of hiring people in Serbia. Like I think the main challenge hiring people in Serbia, aside from the fact that their financial system is, not necessarily, they don't have the same access to services for payment and sending and receiving payments, things like this. And the infrastructure is a little weaker, so you're going to tend on average to get slower internet speeds, etc. In spite of that, you have a very educated populace, right? Education is free, unemployment is high, and as a result, you can get very educated, hardworking people who are going to be available there. Now, the other thing that's a little bit of a challenge is it's quite a small market, right? You have like 5-6 million people there, and so even if you're, you think, oh, okay, great, I'm hiring coders, I can get great people there. Well, yeah, maybe you can, but there's a lot fewer of them. So if you're going to compare that to Ukraine, to Romania, to Poland, where the population is much bigger, well, now all of a sudden you just have a larger talent pool. And you get something similar in Estonia. When I talk to people who are living in Estonia, it's like, look, the competition for talent in Tallinn is very high. It's quite a techie city, and it's a small population. A lot of people want those same people, and so that's going to create a dynamic where it's tough to get the people who you want. Something similar in Singapore. Singapore is notoriously challenging to gain access to good talent if you're not very well funded, etc. Now, Singapore is not a cheap place in general. It's very expensive, right? So that's not going to work for you necessarily so well. Oh, which brings me to a kind of final thing, and then I'm going to wrap up. But it's obviously airlines. Now, you're not going to choose airlines typically based on where you are, unfortunately, because airlines, due to the rules, only fly to certain areas. But first of all, low-cost airlines in some areas are outrageously cheap. I saw tickets for Wizz Air from Bulgaria to Greece back maybe a year ago for €1. It's outrageous. And on the flip side, you have like Qatar Airways. Qatar is insanely good value. Like, you can search for business class tickets, and most of the time I would say Qatar is the best and the cheapest. So again, it comes down to one of these things. If you don't get what you pay for, you could have paid for British Airways and you could have had crap, right? You can pay for Qatar Airways and you have this amazing experience. And oh, by the way, it costs a lot less than British Airways. Funny how that works. Like, if they were allowed to compete internally in Europe, they would destroy them, because it's just so much better. So you get companies like Singapore, like Qatar, like Emirates, etc., who just, I mean, the domestic airlines in the US and kind of like the within Europe airlines there, you know, Air France, British Airways, Lufthansa, etc., garbage by comparison, garbage. So anyway, those are just some things to think about, some observations of where you can get good value. And I certainly kind of encourage you to explore and find places where you can find great deals for, you know, sourcing products, for, you know, setting up businesses, sourcing staff. If you have ideas, please share them with us. Like, we like to hear. And, you know, if you're interested, say, in help with sourcing staff, it's something that we'll often do for people. So you can reach out to us and we can help you to get some high quality people for, you know, better price. So hope that helps, and we will see you guys on the next video.